agenda from Doug, and maybe you've had a chance to take a look at what they are, but I think we'll start off by having Doug just kind of run down some of the things that we had from the last couple of meetings.
So what I was trying to do is I was putting together talking points, and when we last met, we talked about trying to tie together where we were, and then let's hear from the people who were here, right? So Sean Flynn spoke 2 meetings ago, and he has taken a number of people on visits to a number of different schools and a number of different situations, and so they have seen some things, and of course then many of them have worked here long enough to have lived in this facility in terms of what it can and cannot do. So it was sort of a combination of that. So when we met to talk about this presentation, I would talk about kind of tying together how this all started, which is what the talking points are. And I'm happy to email them to you because you've heard them all already. That one of the first things we talked about was the 21st century education and a facility for it, right? That we'd have flexible space, that we'd have collaborative space, and that we were looking at some integrated learning across disciplines. So part of the presentations here were people who are sort of presenting some of that for next year and have seen that in other places and are hoping kind of to make some of that happen. Then we were going to talk about some things with the current facility. I'm just going to cover a couple of things. Because of the school committee's push, I think, partly then with administrative push, of increasing the music programs over years, the music room is now too small. There's really no practice space, and if you ever watch our band, you see about 12 percussionists in this little corner because there's just no space anymore. And that's again, right, that's being a victim of our own success. But the reality is that room can't hold our band anymore. In terms of a school that is trying to be college career life prep for everyone, often schools like this have a number of support rooms for students. And Carol will talk a little bit, right, of things she's done to sort of create those spaces or other things. But often they're very intentional spaces. They're in places, again, with good lighting or with certain types of things to help students given what their needs are. There's little natural light in the building. I think we know there are very few meeting spaces. Then this is very brief. Strategic space. If we're going to be a school for the community, then we probably would have access to the outside for a possible PCC room or like college room. Nurse's office is most likely to need outside access when emergency personnel come here, and there is no actual outside access. And with the increase of poverty in the area, McKinney-Vento is the federal program for homelessness. Oftentimes a nurse's office will have kind of a pantry or something for needs of students in the community and needs of their families. That again, you're helping your students and then you're helping your families because you're sort of this community center. And again, with that sort of outside access, you kind of make that happen. I've worked in places where our JROTC program did it. Someone usually does it, but oftentimes it's the nurse because she's the one who usually knows. Right, a kid comes in who's sick, and you're like, why are you sick? Well, I haven't eaten in 3 days. Right, that sort of stuff exists. And so strategically, you look at the facility, and that kind of stuff being on the outside makes a lot of sense for those purposes. Our teachers, I'm not going to talk for very long. I summarized that sort of stuff. Our teachers want to talk about our current spaces, what they can do, what they can't do currently, and then the fact that a number of people here are looking at some changes we're making to the curriculum because the vision as we've presented it is occurring. It's starting. So as we look at that, what can the facility do? What can it do? As we look at sort of our future vision, so Erin will talk about some programs that will be beginning, that's like a 3 to 5 year kind of move in. Chris will talk about some things like we want to start here and be able to get there, and other people. So you'll see kind of like what we can do now, how that's difficult, and then given where we want want to go, how it becomes more difficult year over year. Okay, and then what we were hoping to do, if there's time at the end, Aaron will have to go because he has the farthest drive, but we were going to sort of talk about it, see if you have any questions, and then try to give you a tour so you could see it. So look, this is what I can do, and now look at, if we were to give really what we consider proper education, this is what this would look like, this is where we would do this. And it would be great to get everyone into Tom's burgeoning makerspace, and so you can see exactly how difficult it is to make anything in a space when we're all in there. And just, to get a sense of what it is we want to do, and I think you feel it, see it, it will help. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Aaron, we should probably figure out, maybe get that chair up here so you can kind of. And so Aaron's going to talk. Aaron Fisher's going to talk about science, about the labs in science, about classroom. Project Lead the Way, which the grant is due today or tomorrow? Tomorrow, where we have this great opportunity to put it together. And then
I went over it with Chrissy. She's finishing it up.
then advanced manufacturing. Chris Danello going to talk about auto, movement towards some certification programs, chapter 74. Tom's going to talk about Project Lead the Way as well. Makerspace, advanced manufacturing, technology. Neil about art, some of the cross-curricular, and particularly one class in design that we're looking at, which would go across wood and art. And we'll look kind of at the space of that. Kathy will talk about preschool, culinary, and Carol will talk about library, how it's used, right? One of your most common spaces, student space, storage, and issues there. And we'll kind of walk you around and let you see it, but also just get a sense. The classroom's a classroom, and we think Aaron will be able to cover most of that, and then we'll just cover these spaces that we're looking at to try and transform what we mean by education and what you see. Does that make sense?
So, first thing I want to say is, I just reiterate, when you do go to Tom's Makerspace, please do look there. I'm going to have a bunch of kids working for the General Dynamics robotics competition. About 15 of them. We're all going to be stuffed in there with stuff, trying to store stuff places. So I guess I'll talk about classrooms first. So in classrooms, just in general classroom, I'm a science teacher. I'm the physics teacher, or one of the physics teachers here, if you don't know me. And physics is a fairly equipment-heavy subject. We have very big things that we play. It's like toys, right? Very big toys. But even in even an English teacher or a history teacher here, what I think we're trying to move to as far as 21st century skills is a more collaborative project-based approach where kids can work together and sort of practice problem solving, analytic skills, and that sort of thing. And then in groups, and then be able to separate again and be able to reflect and do individual work. So I've been able to visit a couple of different places this year, and one thing that I noticed universally is classrooms are much larger than what we typically have. They allow for a lot more space, for a lot more separation of groups during group work. That being said, in science, a lot of the time, I'm going to speak for the science in the labs. In science, which is, as I said, equipment heavy, a lot of times that when we do lab work, which we feel is very important, it does get to that collaboration, problem solving, and analytic skill building. It doesn't necessarily fall neatly within the discrete periods of the day. Many times we're left like a quarter of the way to go with a lab, and the bell is rung. Now, with the spaces we have now, there are no places for us to put that equipment aside, and not to be touched for the next period or so, and move on and be able to actually go through the rest of our day doing experiments with other kids. So we have to take time, everything has to be broken down, put away. Doug said, with music, science is another department that is a victim of its own success. We have fairly big classes now. For instance,
What's a big class?
For instance, my AP physics class, which has 26 students in it, that's one.
And that's an AP class?
That's an AP class. I have 2 AP classes. 26 and I believe a 22. So, I mean, that's a whole nother problem with, group sizes that I won't go into. But, so what we're forced to do is we're forced to break down all that equipment and be able for the next class to use it, and then the next day we have to reassemble it and get back to where you were, I guess, to continue the lab. In physics, that's a hard time. It's rough sometimes because not everything has the same coefficient of friction. Not everything, if you're dealing with some stuff, it's kind of your own equipment specific rather than the group specific. So we would need that sort of storage space. We need another thing that I saw. Well, one thing that I saw in the places that I visited also was one was a big lab space, and then a sort of a teaching space on the side. They were almost separate rooms. They called them the theory rooms. And what it did, it allowed you to have everyone in the class in sort of an intimate setting such as this. And then when they broke into projects or labs or something, you're not right on top of it. It's not quite so intimate anymore, which is a good thing. Let me see. So that is one big thing with labs. The other is, many times I'm forced to go into the hallway with my labs because there's not adequate space in the classroom. For instance, if we're doing a projectile motion lab and I have 8 groups firing projectiles places, it gets a little chaotic if we're all in the classroom. Especially they fire about 10 feet. There's some crossfire.
Yes, I heard you was at home the other day. What's going on out there?
So many times I will have to go to a larger space for that sort of thing. That way people don't interfere in each other's experiments. And we find that in other disciplines as well. I'm going to just quickly go to start covering. We are looking to provide a path. About 2 years ago, we did a self-study embodiment. And one of the things that was suggested in that self-study is that we really don't have an engineering program. Sean Flynn came to me and we started talking about possible ways that we can address that while addressing the charges that he is looking after, such as career readiness and CVTE. And we happened upon a program called Project Lead the Way. Project Lead the Way has been around forever, has great results, and it is by far the best that we've looked at. To do that, and Christy has put in grants, I guess, for quite a lot of money to do this and to implement this. Some of the programs, for instance, a advanced manufacturing and design program or project program would require a much bigger space than Tom's makerspace right now. As far as one storing 2 equipment needs, 3 being able to, well, I guess
So, Erin and I have gone on a couple of visits to schools with a bunch of other people, but we specifically went to the Project Lead the Way conference in Worcester. And we've used here for the last year and a half the UMass Amherst computer science curriculum, and Erin and I are looking at computer science as well as the engineering and the advanced manufacturing. And they have a pretty rigid curriculum that you can change and kind of interject your own curriculum with. We've talked to the people at McCann Tech, and they've given us some ideas. But what it really comes down to for us, and what Erin is focused on, is space. And when you walk into the makerspace, you'll see how tight it is. I'm not even 100% sure it's ADA compliant in there. But when you get 16, 15 people in there, and there's literally 16 chairs, if any projectile was going, it's going to hit somebody. But
The school committee will put in a line item for helmets.
well, we do have protective glassware. But it really, I think for us, it really comes down to more of a safety issue, or we just limit the number of students that can take it. Christy Farina, a couple of years ago, had her class do some 3D design work, and then they would come in and see if their design would print out on the 3D printer. Their design time took maybe a week or two in class, which isn't too bad, but then we could only print one per day, and she had 2 classes with about 15 people. So they're waiting over like a month for the results. And some of that is design flaw. Their project would try to print, they can't print it. They have to print it during my free time because nobody in that class knew how to do the printer. So I think really the bottom line, you know, with all the keywords they've been throwing at us and all the training that we would really like to do, we really want to have a safer place for the kids to work. We'd like to be closer to each other so we can collaborate a little bit better, and be able to offer it to a more variety of students instead of, you know, the six people who have been classified as nerds and feel comfortable in the maker. Well, it's true. You know, they feel comfortable in the makerspace because it looks intimidating to somebody who hasn't been in there. They don't walk in there and go, "Oh, I could do that." They're really more hands-offish, and it's very male-driven at this point. So our target is space, safety, and we'd like to get a more diverse population in there. And it's really hard to do because we don't have a lot of room for them to just be free in there, and for us to walk around and actually make sure they're being safe.
So ideally, what we would like is we would like to almost merge
If we could have a wing, that's
if
really
we
what
could have a wing
want.
community, but if we could have ideally a big enough space where you are able to have the theory room, you would be able to have access to manufacturing design equipment, CNC machines, lathes, and so on. But also a room. Now, what we're hoping is that teachers that instruction here is not quite so teacher centric. It does not require me to be pontificating in front of the room the entire time. The kids can be working at stuff, and if they have problems, they can, one, try to solve it themselves as they would do in the real world, or do some research themselves in the real world, but two, then I could be a guide on the side, or Tom could be a guide on the side. Many of the places we went to had, kids would be at, they would have, let's say that they were learning something like CAD. They would have a computer, they would have 2 screens up there, one with the project that they're working on, and the second would be, you know, instructions. You know, like I looked over a kid's shoulder, he had like screens tiled, like he had instructions, he had like a YouTube video of the guy doing it. I mean, it was, but that's how kids learn now. That's how kids are, how it's done in the real world. Yeah. So ideally, the space would be big enough to house those three things, which would require, I mean, there would be wiring, server issues here, and all sorts of things if we were to try to do it with, not to mention the trekking back and forth all over the place to find three spots that fit some of those needs, but not fit all of them.
In this area you're calling the makerspace, what class is it used for?
It's, anybody can use it who wants to. Any class, if they have a project they wanna do, can come down, whether it's 3D printing, or if they want help with a project, they can come down and get some technology help, if they wanna bring a Chromebook card down or something like that. It's very, yeah, it's literally like right next to my classroom where I teach programming and web design, computer management. So those two classrooms used to be one. I don't know if you remember when the school had the typing room. These two were the old typing room. We just put up a wall and the space was split too. So it's a classroom on one side and the makerspace on the other.
I don't remember it, I went to Searles.
Oh.
So this is over
We
here
had
in
a
the
touch.
H wing,
Yeah.
or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Ideally, if we were able to do this, many of the schools that we saw, that we went to were open 18 hours a day.
Aaron, what schools did you go to?
We did Mechantech, we did
Worcester.
Worcester Polytech, we saw, and Worcester Technical High School. So we
Yeah.
went WPI and Worcester Technical High School. I also visited Taconic. What would be, some of those schools are open 18 hours a day. Like the school is truly a community hub. It would be great if, like he said, that the nurse's office had an outside entrance. It would be amazing if the makerspace had an outside entrance in such a way that people from the community could, one, be trained in manufacturing technologies and so on, but also to use the makerspace. I know a lot of towns use libraries have libraries.
I know you have to go, Aaron, so, the question that I'm gonna ask, and I'll ask to all people who have devoted some of their time tonight, all the teachers who I work with too, for, I think some of them who were on the past committee, right, Tom? Were you on the, I think Kara was on the
Yeah,
last
Kara
committee.
was.
Right, it's like deja vu all over again, to quote my favorite philosopher, Yogi Berra. But at many of the forums, and I'll address this to all the teachers, and you can incorporate your answer in your presentation. We seem to be doing pretty good at Monument. We're getting kids into MIT, we're getting kids into Harvard, we're getting kids into great universities and colleges. What do you need? What do you need that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it seems to be that it ain't broke because of these
Listen,
colleges.
I'm gonna cut you off right there, because I'm gonna say it is broke. Okay? I'll tell you why it's broke.
So-
Yeah.
I tried.
I'm gonna say, first of all, my name's Chris and I'm grateful to be here, and thank you all for being here as well.
Do you want to answer?
Yeah. Is Aaron done?
Is that? Well, I don't know.
Do you want to answer?
You wanna
before-
add?
I would say that one thing that we do a wonderful job, and we do get kids into some wonderful universities. I think a question would be, do we prepare the kids who don't go to universities, do we prepare them adequately for that we give them an advantage over other kids?
Yes.
that they have more years? We don't have any certificate programs as to for electricians, nurses, mechanics, or anything like that, carpenters. Part of what I've been doing with Sean is we've met with community groups, I can't remember the last one, it was a house.
Could you speak louder?
Construct.
A construct.
Okay.
And, sort of things that they would be looking, that would give, that they would be looking for, that would give, potential employees a leg up on the competition. And those are we are looking at incorporating those, as Tom said, the project lead, the curriculum is somewhat rigid, but you can interject some stuff. That is the sort of stuff that we would be interjecting into the project lead, the way curriculum, some real life applicable skills for kids who aren't going to those MIT or Brown or something like that, that will allow them to more easily join the workforce.
Tom or Aaron, I don't know if you were here when the last proposal was made, I can't recall if you were or not. Okay, but Tom was. Some of the things that you brought up, that Aaron has brought up, were not around then, were they? Like Makerspace
The
and,
Makerspace was just starting.
yeah, but
So
I mean, it
towards
wasn't.
towards the end of that, towards the end of the renovation project or
Yeah.
proposal is when we incorporated the Makerspace. And it started in a, like 12 by 12 room off
Yeah,
the library, and we
library
quickly
stuff.
grew past that.
Well, the reason I'm asking is that we have gone beyond, would you agree? We have gone beyond what the last plan would have incorporated. Would you agree with that or not?
As far as the Makerspace was concerned?
Well, in terms of some of the things that both you and Aaron have mentioned. In other words, the space, the previous design of the renovation, would it have incorporated some of the things that you've just brought up?
I don't remember everything exactly, but I think it would have incorporated for some expansion, because the science wing was gonna be
Yeah,
pretty good
I know
size.
that,
And I was gonna,
legally
like, our
possible.
area was gonna be moved down by you guys.
Yes, but I don't know that it would have incorporated, so yes, in part, it goes beyond what we had previously envisioned, but.
The classroom spaces were significantly larger in the renovation proposal, whereas things such as the gym or the auditorium did not alter dramatically, if at all. I think even like the cafeteria was smaller, but the classrooms were significantly larger.
And each
And the
wing had
design
a
also
common
had,
space.
like Tom, Aaron, and the other tech spaces were together. So that now it's, Aaron in the F wing, Tom's in the H wing, Neil and John, we started in the library, it was very disparate around the building. The, other proposal had them at least together where they could more easily collaborate.
Can I just follow up on Bill's point? I think getting these kids into excellent schools has been just a result of having 50 years of excellence in this school district. But what I'm worried about is there's a lag. So these kids are getting in. When they're getting in, if they don't do well when they're in there, because they're competing against kids who get to schools that are better prepared, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, these high-level schools or programs are going to say, well, these kids from aren't doing well, so we might not see that results now, but 10, 15 years down the line, we might not be getting these kids in the schools because they're not doing well. So my question is, do you feel that the kids now are at a competitive disadvantage to kids who are going to schools that are, have these new improved type of classrooms, makerspaces, et cetera? I mean, would you, when you classify, I mean, again, our teachers are great, the kids are great, but, it seems like
Personally?
we're lacking. Yeah, your personal.
Personally, I would feel, yes, they would be at a disadvantage. I mean, part of, it's kind of cliche to say, but, I mean, our job is preparing kids for jobs that don't exist now.
Right.
And if we're using technology and spaces that are, antiquated already, it's hard to. Thanks.
We did have, I did talk to a student who came in just last week, and she said, although I think they're adequately prepared, and whether adequate is the word we want our kids to be when they leave, is really up to us. But she felt that, and she was a computer science major, she felt that she didn't have quite as much behind her going in when she started. But she held her own, and she's doing great. But she could have been doing better. And I think to Bill's, and to Paul's point, and we notice that when we've gone out to schools, like, we always feel like we're behind, because we're always looking at people that are better than us. But I would say that we're better than 75% of the schools out there. But we always keep looking at that 25%, just to edge ourselves up a little bit more. That's why we went to Worcester and McCann. I mean, those guys, we will never have those programs, but it's good to look at them to see, get some ideas from them and get their perspective on things, I think, but.
Our kids
yeah.
are gonna be competing, I mean, Mount Greylock's new, Taconic's new, Kona's.
Yeah.
It looks like it's gonna, so, right now, we're in the top 20%. 10 years from now, when there's 25% more new schools.
Right.
Not just Massachusetts, New York State, are we still gonna be there is, my concern.
And the word adequate, as you just said, Chris. I remember at a public hearing, somebody in the audience talked about when we were considering cuts in art and music, and somebody said, well, there's nothing wrong with eliminating this position in music because I went to a school with 1,000 kids who all took music and we had an adequate music program. And I then retorted, well, monument doesn't stand for just adequate. And it's interesting that word, and I'm just repeating what somebody says. I went to all the forums 3 years ago, and that came up, that question. Well, you're doing really well now, come on, what's going on here? Why are we spending $50 million?
I just have one of the things that kind of gnaws in my head is and I was very active last time around, was that we have predominantly a decreasing population of students. We need more space. The question I would have is that to maintain a facility that will last for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years and adapt to, we kind of look, it's easy to look back and see that this building is 50 years old and we've seen it change and evolve, and I've seen the wiring and the ceilings and all that stuff. I've seen how technology is built into concrete walls. My question is like, how do these schools that you went to show that they can adapt? Is it just a function of space, so they got more space so they can adapt to changing environments, or is it, what were the things that differentiated them to adapt and make sure that we're not revisiting this or reinventing the wheel 10, 20 years down the road? And that may not be a question that you can answer, but I'm just curious.
I'll try the best I can. I'm not afraid of the answer, I guess, whether I have the knowledge or not. In my opinion, I think the things that kept these schools that keeps these schools on the forefront is, as Tom said, they're a McCann, they're a Worcester Polytech, they're a Worcester Conservatory School. They're schools that are designed to design, their primary purpose is to put people into the workforce, and to put people into the workforce of today. So they are using professional machinery, they're using all, the CNC machines that these people would use are 5-axis professional CNC machines that any shop around here, give their left arm to have. They're using cutting edge equipment, they're training kids in the latest techniques. So I think, yes, it is a function of space, it is a function of budget, it is a function of them continually improving themselves through
I think they're constantly adapting, they're funded by General Dynamics. All the software package they were using was $100,000 for the CAD software they had, but General Dynamics had just kind of given it to them because they need their kids. But Worcester in particular, it's just such an open space that I think the reconfiguring of the space is not that difficult, and they're advanced enough with their kids, like they do their own reconstruction of the area. So when they have to rewire, their electrical kids do it. When they have to build an addition or something, they have their kids do it.
So it's really a function of the space and making the space as adaptable as possible, so that if 10 years from now tech isn't a thing but nursing is, they can adapt that space accordingly.
There was very few other than the hallway. Once you went into a room, it was
very
just
few walls and everything was beautiful.
Yeah.
Everything was on casters.
even their industrial equipment was on wheels. So
But
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. As a follow-up, because I did go to McCann and it was fabulous. But we also have to remember they're not a comprehensive high school.
Right.
They have a very specific mission, which we are not going to do that. And so by design, it was really a very different program, both physically and curriculum and all aspects.
Well, I'll just say that, being a graduate of this school 30 years ago, academically, I thought I was well prepared, but boy, I sure wish I had jumped onto some of the vocational things, because what I do now took 10 years of hitting my head against the wall to get up to speed, so.
Let's hear from Chris.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so, sorry for jumping in early there. Really excited. No, I was like pumped, this is my chance. But yeah, so the auto shop here at the high school has always been like a amazing program, and I'm grateful to be teaching it right now. And I'm just, the building was built in 1968, or just 67, 68 for the 20th century, and now it's the 21st century, and we're 20 years into the 21st century, and it's time that we take that into consideration, because the automobile industry is such a progressive industry, and automobiles have changed so much in the last 10 years, 5 years, and especially 20 years. So, I mean, that's something that our space needs to be prepared for, and it needs to be, and when we go down there and look at it, you'll see why, it's a tight space. But one of the things I just want to touch on, so I gave everybody this right here, we'll go through that in a second. But one of the things I want to touch on is, there's a huge demand for skilled tradespeople in this country. And when we think about building this school, we need to take that into consideration. There's such a high demand for that. And I heard somebody say that the population, right, number of students. So we're talking, that's like the quantity versus quality battle right there. Like, do we need 1,000 students to make it worthwhile to build a new school and to have the space, designed in a way because we have this many students, or do we just want our students to have a quality education, despite how many students we have, And that's what I think we really need to focus. We need to focus on quality, okay? And so where we're at right now, the auto shop, okay? So we're a Chapter 74 program, and there's only two schools that are regional schools in our state that have Chapter 74 programs like we do. So we have Chapter 74 program, which is automotive, and horticulture is the other Chapter 74 program. So, and I'm gonna tell you why that's important. So Chapter 74 is a criterion program that's, the state mandates that we meet a certain amount of standards in order to be qualified for that Chapter 74 program. And if you go on the Mass DOE website, you can look that up and see there's a lot to be learned about that. So right now we're seeking this SP2 safety pollution certification, which is something I'm going to start teaching during the second semester. So we're working on a certification program for our students so they can meet industry standards when they graduate high school, and they'll have the certification. So when they apply for a job, they can put that on their resume, and that's gonna be something that they have and other students don't have, or other schools don't offer. Where did I get that idea from? I got that idea from Worcester Technical High School when I visited there. And I looked into it, and it's an affordable program. They make it affordable because they want to promote this program for the schools for education. We're also seeking to be ASC Education Foundation certified, formerly known as NATEF. So in the area of MLR. MLR stands for Maintenance and Light Repair. Okay, so right now we are not a ASC Education Foundation certified program because we don't meet certain criteria. So if we become ASC Education Foundation certified, I don't know why they changed that name. I like NATEF so much better, but so if we become certified, that means we can prepare our students for ASC certification. And what that means is that they'll have the credentials to get a career right out of, upon graduation of high school. So, mechanics don't need to be certified to get a job. But if they have that certification, it sells them and it makes them more valuable, more desirable. And that's one of the goals that I want for my students. 15 students in my first period class, and then it varies after that. That's my largest class. I have another class with 12 students in it. And that might not sound like a lot of students, but I'll tell you why that's a lot of students in a little bit. We do live work in the auto shop, so we take on, you know, community members' cars, teachers' cars, students' cars. And we work on 10 to 15 cars a week. Today we worked on 4 vehicles. And those are just customers' vehicles. We also started working on a vehicle, like a tear-down vehicle, so we started taking engine out of the vehicle. And if we walk down there, I'll show you what that looks like. So space needs. So according to Chapter 74, so if you look this up online, you can look it up. For automotive technology, if you have a class of 15 students, and that's the max number of students you can have per one teacher, so student-teacher ratio is 15 to 1. You need an average square footage of 275 feet per student. So my first period class, I would need an auto shop size of 4,125 square feet. So my auto shop right now is like, you know, less than 2,000 square feet. So I'm not meeting that requirement according to the Chapter 74 guidelines. So I'm not in compliance. Now, I could easily say, okay, that's a matter of scheduling, right? So we just don't have that many students per class. But the demand for automotive is high right now, so we have that many students per class. So we don't want to turn students away because we have a lot of students that need a trade. All right, so automotive has this legacy of taking in a lot of at-risk students, a lot of students that don't fit into traditional education very well. You know, have a hard time sitting at a desk all day long. So, you know, that's what we specialize in, and it's been very beneficial for those students. Okay, so.
Plus in CBTE, it's important to have the entrepreneurial aspect of it and the business side of it. So there's no place for a customer to come
Right.
to the auto shop. Like in other places that we visited, there was an actual place that you went in, just like another auto place where you get your car done, that there's like a little office, you know, a coffee machine and
Kathy
whatever.
she wants luxury all the time.
I'm not saying I know about coffee, I'm just saying like, you need a place to go to, like they don't know where to go to when they go to the back, they're like, I don't know, this is auto,
We
but
have
now
a
there's
Curry
this big
2.0.
garage here and it's like intimidating, there's no office area, there's no place for them to go to and say, I came here now, I have an appointment to get my car work
Right.
done. You know, so
Yeah.
we're lacking that part of
Right.
customer service.
That's a great point. Okay, so that's space. I know, teach it a little bit. So CVT stands for Career Vocational Technical Education. That's our group. That's what we call ourselves. Yeah, so a receiving area, like a customer waiting area, all that kind of stuff would be great. So when we talk about like space, we can include that into like a spot for customers. But that doesn't go into the overall workspace. So so this criteria right here, these guidelines, are for shop space, like
Right, that's what I'm
actual
saying,
working
like that, but
space,
that's
you know
an
what I'm saying?
important piece of it too.
And that's an important piece to take into consideration if we're really gonna like prepare our students for every aspect of the automobile industry, you know, for the 21st century, for the rest of this.
Well, I know
century.
as a female going in to get my car done, it's nice to go to a little area, even if it's a little, you know, posh, if that's what I want. You know, whether there's like a little play area for the kids or whether it's just a place to go to where you know where you're going.
No,
It says,
you know what you're talking about.
where I'm going for my appointment.
Buying a
Oh,
scar.
sorry.
Tom is supposed to be in charge of this.
So I was looking at the
You're in
time.
charge.
So, you know, Kathy is just referring to like flexible spaces, so, you know, I heard that talked about before, so you're talking about flexible spaces, right?
Yes.
So we have flexible spaces designed into our automotive program that allows us to have a space for people to sit down, people to go. Right now, we don't have those flexible spaces, but, you know, and if you read more about, you know, if we go down further, you threw me off track a little bit, that's okay. Okay. Well, listen, if we
That's my
have a
job.
space, so right now I have an auto shop and I have a classroom, okay? The auto shop's here and the classroom's at the center of the wing. So I can't visually see what goes on in the classroom and the auto shop at the same time. So I would like a space where the auto shop is connected to the classroom with a window, you know, so I can see. So it's hard to be two people, you know, at one time. It's impossible. I've tried it for years, and the hair keeps getting grayer and grayer, but that's okay. It's all good. We're working there, exactly. But anyways, so the auto shops, yeah. So making this space really work well for me, and to be structured in a way where I can promote structure, and then we're not, Tom, why are you laughing? So I can promote structure and then have these flexible spaces so students can have a lot of individual projects going on. You know, they can be doing exploration, we can have customers' cars on lists, all this good stuff that we should be having, you know? I mean, I would love for our high school to be able to do inspections, imagine that? That's a possibility, like, they have, I didn't know, I was blown away, I went to this high school, I'm like, what, are you doing inspections here? I'm like, this is incredible. And the guy said, yeah, we can inspect cars. I go, what about, like, aren't you taking business away from the community? They're like, we're not giving it away for free. And I'm like, that just dawned on me, like, you're not giving it away, you know? You're showing the students how they can, you know, it's income. It's realistic, $35.
$35.
A high school can do inspections.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that was even possible in the city. I mean, you know.
Your students have the same class rotation, so when the bell rings, they have to get out and leave if they're in the
Right, so scheduling scheduling's tough. Luckily, we have these awesome guidance counselors that always do a really great job trying to schedule auto students, multiple periods, back-to-back periods. Sometimes they have to leave, so it can be a 15-minute period, then they're off to another class. You know, I have students that go from auto to you know, chemistry, auto to physics, auto to math, auto to English, and then they're back to, a couple periods later, they come back to auto. So that can be a conflict. So we can work with that, though. That's not like the biggest problem. The biggest problem is, like, our space is not big enough for the demand, you know? And
So
that's a
given-
big factor.
Given the space limitations.
Right.
And the rapidity with which auto technology is changing,
Absolutely.
is it possible for us to, no matter what spaces you have, to be able to keep up?
So that's right. So if you read down below, like, willingness, so we are always willing as a program to keep up, right? We bought a brand new lift just recently that's like state-of-the-art lift that can lift, like, we can do alignments on smart cars and Priuses and hybrids and all these kind of other things. You know, but the lift is so we bought this brand new lift. I just got it, you know, a few days after Christmas. And it's great. So that's like willingness to keep up right there. So as a school, we are willing to keep up, but we are still limited by space, you know, the space. No matter what, we're gonna always be willing to keep up. This school, we get by, you know what I'm saying? Like I always say, like, we manage, right? We get by. You know, that's why we've been able to have success, because we do what we have to do, right?
Would the same kind of question that I asked earlier, would the previous plan have addressed these needs?
I don't think they would've. And that part of my life is kind of, I'm foggy, like, I don't know, like, I was like messed up at that point. I don't know where I was, but.
All right, you have one more minute.
Blurry, but, I don't know, it was just like over my head, I was like, what's going on? But anyways, that part was foggy. I don't think I had enough say in that. I really felt like the teachers didn't have enough say in that plan. And I don't know if I'm stepping out, I don't know if I'm.
No, you're not.
I just, regardless, I don't know.
I want the hard truth.
The hard truth is
I
like.
want everybody to hear the hard
So
truth.
yeah, straight up, like brass tacks, this space is too small. It doesn't have enough, like, if I put a truck up in the air in my shop, it hits the lights, you know, so like, so if you take auto and you're 6 foot plus, you can't stand straight up underneath the vehicle. You have to like sit on a stool or bend over and like, so like limitations, right? That's a limitation. Have we been able to get by? Absolutely. We're gonna get by, of course, because we don't quit, right? Like, there's a monumental amount of people in this room. We don't ever give up, right?
Just figure out
You know
how
what I'm
to
saying?
get by.
We'll get by, but why should we just get by?
Right, well, again,
Why
it
should
goes
we
back
just
to
get by?
adequate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the space that you currently have now, I mean, are you guys pulling the MacGyver to keep it safe?
Oh, our safety is, that's one area we
I mean, like,
can't
is
cut corners.
ventilation adequate, or?
Yeah, I know.
It's really a
Or do you have a big,
loaded question. Yeah.
since you've got a big hole in the wall so that there's some air flow?
I think the time's
That's
up.
what I'm
Just go
asking.
for it.
Oh, now you're really.
And then, to what degree-
No, absolutely, our spot is safe, and actually, the Department of Education, Dave Edmonds, who works for safety, the safety part of the Department of Education, visits our school. He visits our school at least once a year, sometimes more times. And he's like, check everything, if there's one thing that's off, we have to correct that. So we would not be able to run that shop if there was any safety issues, like everything, like the maintenance department here, the custodian department, they keep everything legit, right? So safety, like that's why the school still looks the way it does after how many years and how many students, right? So the safety we're strong on safety. We teach safety already. I have a safety curriculum, I teach it. The only reason why I wanna go to the safety SP2 curriculum is because it offers more, it's all online. Students are more prone to doing that kind of, they like that, you know, so
Yeah.
all online, and they get a certificate. So they have something to take with them after they're done, versus like a test score that says they passed, okay? You know? Yeah.
One more question, and this, you know, you may not have had practical example of this, but could a kid in a wheelchair work in automotive class right now?
You know what, if the class is small, it's a small enough class size, and the student will be fine. We have a student in a wheelchair that goes to our school right now, and believe it or not, my wife asked me this question today, because she thought that would be a very important thing to think about. And I was like, okay. And I was, yes, I think a student would be okay. There would be limitations because it's tight. You'll see why it's tight when we go down there.
Right.
But, they wouldn't be able to wash their hands without somebody helping them.
Mhm.
That's a limitation, right?
Well, I'm just saying, like,
You know?
technically, a student with a disability has to have
I mean, I want them to be able to wash their hands.
opportunity to
every
do
opportunity.
everything a kid who doesn't. So I'd ask the same question about the technology room. You're saying it's not ADA compliant. I also know that a lot of the bathrooms are not ADA
Yes.
compliant. So my question would be, could a kid in a wheelchair work in that class?
They can.
Okay.
And I mean.
But there's some accommodations
Yes.
to make that happen.
Yeah, if you talk about like least restrictive environment, I would say there is some restrictions in my environment for a student in a wheelchair, but it's not fully restricted. You know, they could be a part of the program, you know. But as far as least restrictive, I would say.
The simple fact that they can't wash their hands without help.
But they would probably need help washing their hands, and that would be the big thing. As far as like they could reach the fire extinguishers, they could be safe, you know, I mean, everything in that sense would be, you know, the safety stuff probably would be okay, but the washing hands part would be a big factor, you know?
And also, Rich, in response, if that student in a wheelchair wanted to take greenhouse, they'd have a real problem, and the district.
I understand that. I mean,
And you know that.
Say
Yeah.
someone who's in a chemistry class is probably gonna have some
Right.
trouble.
I mean, but
navigating those.
with the greenhouse, if a kid really wanted to do the greenhouse program
Yeah.
and go through what Terry Kennedy used
They
to,
can
where
go
they're
downhill
certified,
pretty easily, but
wouldn't need it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The library as well.
Okay.
If a
Right.
student in a wheelchair is daily
Well, yeah,
library
no,
user,
that
then
ramp
we have
is-
to go open the door.
Well, it's
Um,
opening the door in the ramp.
Why don't we
too,
move
is-
on? Chris, you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
stick around. And then we're gonna-
Alright.
Tom,
What?
you're next.
Oh,
Project Lead the
I-
Way, Makerspace, Advanced
Oh, I
Manufacturing.
went after Aaron.
Okay, all right,
You
okay.
two collaborate.
Okay, Neil?
Come on, Neil.
Okay. First of all, Aaron said some great stuff. I just wanted, and I mean, the conversation's been really good so far. Let's see, I do have notes here. Make sure. I think the overall thing for me is that the school, it's both a curriculum and a facility, is that we teach in little silos. We each have our room and we teach our subject. The schedule's designed that way, the rooms are designed that way, and for the most part, the curriculum is designed that way. It is changing. And what that does not encourage there is creative thinking everywhere, but at the same time, it's limited, it's contained thinking. When you go to this class, and I could do it with any class, you're in a container thinking about things that way. And I don't think that's how we should be teaching anymore. I don't think that's how people learn. I think when they get out there in the real world, it's collaboration. There's discovery, there's exploration, you're learning about this, but you need to know about that. And whether it's technology or math or poetry, they're all connected, and they're all part of the same process. And particularly with, I can tell you lots of stories about, my growing up there was very little technology in this school, as a teacher, and then coming through and having kids have phones that do these extraordinary things, and they start teaching me how, I'm kind of plugging away how I usually do things, and the kids were like, actually a simple one is, I remember I'm showing my assignment, I have a projector, I'm a high-tech guy, I got the projector, so the kids can see it, and this kid walks up with his phone and takes a picture of it. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm getting your homework, what do you think I'm doing? And the first time I was like, oh. So, the bottom line is that, I look at specifically in the art department, and, historically when I first got here, we taught kids how to work in watercolor, or how to work in clay, but it was all compartmentalized. It was about clay, it was about watercolor, and then we went to the next classroom and learned something else. And later on, we really started thinking more conceptual, about more idea-based, and what do you need for your ideas? And then technology came into it. And where we are now, we're still conceptual-based, but I think design is becoming much, much more important. And therefore, design is integrating, CVTE, and, we're no longer artists. We are making, designing, thinking, figuring out how the world works, problem solving, and all those things do not work if you're in a classroom and the computers are, literally a 4-minute walk away, or the other teacher you don't see during the day because she's busy in her classroom and I'm busy in my classroom. Or how do my kids know about, woodworking tools? My the art students, they don't unless they take John Hartcorn's class, and not all of them do. And I could say the same with welding, with Chris's class, and the same with, you look at what a makerspace is, and Tom's class is literally a 5-minute walk from my room, and our schedule, you have 3 if you book, but try to get 8 kids or 12 kids from my room to your room. That's 15 minutes. Anyways, there isn't anything that encourages collaboration about this school, unless teachers really work hard, find time to meet, and that's in the process of changing, which is great. But the facility itself, what goes on in my room, you don't really know unless you come in, walk through the door, and hang out there. And I would much rather see my room have one less wall, so when you're walking down the hall, there's my room, there's the work, there's the kids, and the kids can see what's going on in Chris's space. And I think there is a natural degree of kids that there's the science kids, there's the art kids, there's the tech kids, and that exists in this school, and I would like to see a lot less of it. And if there was more physical integration, I think that would be much more important. Let me get my little notes here. So let's see, Bill's question. I'm really glad that we sent a kid, we got early admission into RISD this year. Tallulah King, wonderful, fabulous. But guess what? There's a lot of other kids besides Tallulah. She's fabulous, but she's one of few. And I want to see a majority of our kids, not getting into MIT, but understanding what it is that they need to do to think creatively and productively. And so that's what I say to your question is great, MIT, awesome, but I don't care.
Well, I was just thinking as you were talking that you had 2 students last year go to Parsons.
Yeah, and I mean,
Which
every
is
year
a
we've got
top on the line art school.
We've got great, but
So
those
what do we
are-
need a new thing
yeah,
for? They're
I
getting in.
think those kids are the exception. And they're doing great. And I want to more focus on the majority of our kids. And to Paul's question, I mean, personally, because I was familiar with the plan, it would have been better than it is now. Could it have been better than what we designed last time? Absolutely. And I've seen some, and I mean, in my mind, I see something where there is a facility where there's, I would love to see a whole hub maker space where, it's like an enormous space where there's science over here, and there's wood over here, and there's art over here, and a lot of people are sharing space, sharing facilities, sharing ideas, sharing what they learn, because I think Aaron mentioned I'd like to see a lot more students learning through teaching each other, being exposed to different ways things work, and I see myself more of a coach. Give me a facility where I can go around coaching people.
Anybody have questions for Neil?
I'm just curious, just specific to art, I mean, what would be on your wish list, or where you feel do you need more storage, for example? I'd love to hear just nitty-gritty about art.
I think proximity is the biggest. Proximity to other facilities, other, right now, storage, we sort of, yes. You could always use more storage. More space with which to look at work, because we tend to have busy, full spaces, you'll see. We did sort of redesign one room last summer, and it's better, but it has hardly any storage at all. So really, you know, it's like, it'd be great to have, and I think in the last design, there were some more public spaces where we could theoretically bring work, look at it, get it out of the crazy busy art room, and be able to discuss and have other people look at it. And that's something I could see more of.
I have one question. And this is not necessarily a question for you, Neil, but anyone wants to answer, or just something to think about. What percentage of teachers' time in this school is devoted to accommodating for the lack of whatever you wanna call it? And how much of that is impacting the ability to collaborate or innovate? Because I think, it may not be an answer you can quantify, but I think that if we can try to illustrate some anecdotal, some stories that will basically articulate that, I think you can start to, I think that helps to understand, like, what kind of churn are we accomplishing with our school budget here for this building? If, you know, our teachers are devoting X amount of time to accommodating for the shortcomings of the facility, and through that shortcoming, they can't innovate and they can't collaborate. I mean, it's a hard question to answer, but, you know, and it's one of those things, like, I deal with this in my work environment all the time, where I'm making many accommodations, and boy, I really wish I would not have to be reacting and be proactive, and that impacts everything that we're talking about here in terms of making it a school, a district that is going to provide kids with that competitive edge. So, anyone has any comment on that, or?
I'd say, you know, off the cuff, I spend a significant amount of time, because since I've been here, I've rearranged or changed my room at least 6 times, trying to get it. Well, over a
day, or?
No, when I say rearrange, I'm talking about tearing cabinets out,
Yeah.
changing furniture, moving it here, moving it there, you know, and that's just redesigning the room, and that's over a 20-year period. And it's just trying to get it right, and it's like, you know, sometimes it's it's a square peg into a round hole kind of thing.
I was just thinking, you know, I had a Y student a couple years ago did car design, and I was thinking as you were talking, I don't know if one of Chris's students can come down and design, for example, and think about building their own car through your design, but do you have the equipment to do that? To where a kid, or is it a makerspace, where a kid can then take that and actually go to Chris and say, this is what I wanna do this year. I wanna build my own car, and I wanna have a design that's mine. And I'm not sure if that, under the current facility, if that's possible.
Car? I don't know, but I'm sure there's
Well,
things we can.
he had to go, he couldn't do it here, I remember, he had to go down to Connecticut, where he was working with a car company there in order to do his design, because he didn't have the facility here. Now, that was maybe 4 years ago, but still, Carl Bradford, who's not here, and will be here for a couple of meetings, his point was that the electric car is gonna be here, and what are we doing to provide students with that opportunity to learn about electric cars through the equipment that they're gonna need to learn in order to fix these cars and the self-driving cars. So, you know, again, that's where, as Steve Boyd said, we've gotta prepare kids for jobs that aren't really there yet, but will be, and to innovate enough and be adaptable enough to fit in.
I think it's a tough question to answer, because it's hard to sort of sort through in terms of like the time issues of my day. Is it because of the facilities and what I'm working with? Is it the staffing, that if I'm a solo librarian or I'm the only guy in the auto shop, that I just can't leave? Or is it just like other people don't have the same planning period as I do in order to collaborate and maybe come up with innovative projects? So I think there's a lot of layers to it. And I know even at our faculty meeting today, one of the things we're hoping to get in place for next year is more common planning time among teachers. So that those kind of conversations, there's time built in.
But even that requires like a space, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
even town planning kind of requires space. You know, it's like,
Right,
that's
where
like,
you
you know,
meet.
where you're gonna meet, where you're gonna do this. I had a student build an electric car a few years ago, funded by the Student Activities Fund. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
He applied for that grant, and he built it in my classroom. You know, he built it took up the whole, it was like, you know, it was huge underneath. You know, he built an electric go-kart. Really, it was a racing go-kart. And he bought the chassis and then converted the chassis for the electric. And we made like electric boxes for all the batteries, and bought lithium-ion batteries with charging system and all that stuff. It was a huge undertaking, but it took like I was spending like a lot of after-school hours with him. Like we worked on it a lot together. It was great. It worked. You know, but as far as like, yeah, why can't we do more stuff like that? You know, maybe we could have a space for, you know, that kind of exploration going on. That would be awesome. You know, and that's the whole idea of having flexible spaces.
Rich, I'm gonna answer your question in sort of a weird way. I wasn't here obviously for the first two. I think if a new building or a refurb doesn't happen the third time, it would be more devastating than the first two because of the amount of work people have put in to envisioning what education needs to be at Monument Mountain for the next 20 to 30 years. And they recognize that in order to do a large portion of it, the way this facility is structured is just incredibly inadequate to do what people want to do. And I don't know, I wasn't here the first time, but talking to people, I don't think they knew it as well as they know it now. And I sort of heard a little bit in Tom's sort of hesitation to the question, like, well, you know, we kind of make a makerspace work, knowing what we want a makerspace to be, which is not 6 boys anymore. We just can't do it. It cannot be that anymore because equity is one of the major filters that we're looking for, and that goes across gender, that goes across income, that goes across ability, as defined in a number of different ways. And we just continue to explore it, and we received a grant this year that is going to look at all the different ways we're gonna work together and get trained to make it happen. And I just didn't, when we had our planning meeting, everyone had 5 to 10 different things. If I could do this, then the type of education we want to be can happen. And you can hear it, and Chris isn't saying double the space as much as the way the space is. I can't create the environment that our kids deserve to have to get the education they need. And I mean, I think the answer is really, how do we tell the story that that this time it has to happen? And we don't know exactly what it is gonna look like, whatever, but we're ready for it, and we're already working toward it. And that's some of the things we've already started this semester, and we're moving to the ones next semester. If you don't mind, I also, I think, I don't wanna run out of time, I think Kathy should speak. She's gonna speak anyway.
With her coffee.
Yes, maybe. I was thinking about what you were saying about the students that have gone to different colleges and, you know, how great that is, but what about the other students that aren't getting to those colleges or aren't getting to the opportunities that maybe they should be getting to? I think that's my concern, especially as a CBTE teacher. I mean, originally I was in the design plan and I was gonna have a beautiful room out here that the parents could drive around to and drop their students off for the preschool. It would be a big, beautiful room, and, you know, it would be open, it would have a bathroom, it would have all the things that we needed for the preschool. The culinary room would have been a separate room in itself. So I was excited because I was in the planning of, this is what my room would look like, and it didn't happen. So I get that, you know. I think for the preschool, ideally, we would need more space. It is hard for somebody in a wheelchair to come into my room. We have to really move things around to get them to be able to get through the space. One large room would be ideal, an observation room, an office, just for me, which is really nice, but then an office or a space for the students to be able to do their work and then leave it there if they need to, because sometimes they're working on projects that they need to do for preschool students, but then we have to put it all away because then the preschool students are coming into that same room. So to have a space available for the high school students to work in on their own, you know, a space that would just be theirs, like a teacher workroom kind of thing, would be ideal for them. To have an observation room or a window so that they could see. I tried to do this with this big bulletin board that's in my room, but they said there's too much ductwork in the wall and we couldn't do it. But ideally, so that they could observe the students without them seeing them, you know, so that they can make some observations about what students are doing and how they can maybe help them better than if they were actually in the room with them, which is still good too. I mean, obviously those relationships are important, but, and having the culinary room totally separate, you know, having a classroom separate for the child development class so that they're not a part of the preschool program. So like having separate spaces for them would be really ideal, even though there's some, cross things that we do. It would be really nice to have that extra space.
What do you do now? This is what Paul asked at the very beginning of our meetings in the summer, and I'll paraphrase you, but Kathy, what is it that you do now that you could do better if you had the facilities? Give us a specific example.
A specific example would be having a place where the parents could drive around and not have to drive past the dumpster to get into the building. You know, right now they drive out back, drive by the dumpster, try to come in the back door. So ideally having access to the room that was a little bit more accessible, having a little entry area so that the kids could have their cubbies right there, come into the room and then, you know, proceed into whatever the activities that were happening, and not be connected to my class. Currently, I teach a child development class from 8 to 9, or 8 to 8:50, but the preschool kids come in at 8:30. So I dovetail my work between both classes because that's the only way that I can fit it all in. You know, so I run back and forth between preschool and child development. So having maybe a little extra help would be also nice, but having that space for them to come into so that it felt a little bit more welcoming than, you know, driving around the back of the building, go past the auto shop and over here. That's why it would be really nice that if it was originally out front, they would be able to drop in. I mean, I don't know how, you guys had kids that were here and I don't know.
It's hard driving back there. I mean, let alone you get back there, then it's a 3-point turn to try to
Right.
get out, and there are little kids and you're worried, you know.
Kids, and it's just like,
Oh, yeah.
you're dodging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you had 4 people who had kids that went through
Yeah.
Morningside.
Yeah.
And then certainly with drop off, not wanting to get there too early because we don't, you know.
They're knocking on the door.
Yes.
Can I come in?
Yeah.
I know you have a class.
We actually got out of our house early. I don't know what happened today, but it's cold out here.
Kathy, one of the things, it's been years since I took a child psychology course. When we had the 3 triplets who were autistic, now granted, we got a huge amount of money because we were the only school in the country who ever had that situation. I think they were only the 2nd triplet pair in the world, and one of them was in Housatonic. And they come here, and they built an observation room in Stockbridge, where where people from other schools could come and observe without, you know, it's that window like on NCIS, where they look into the interview. You know, I would think that would be an important thing because I know what you.
Yes, I tried to get that, and I'm telling
Right.
you, I just said that was impossible.
Because I deal with, you deal with, I've had kids who've gone through your program, you deal with child psychology, and how do you see kids react and interact, and they change when someone's right there in front of them. It would be, and under the current way, because you do that, you deal with child psychology, it would be, it's impossible to do it that way.
Right.
So it would be better if you could have a facility with some sort of observational window, taking what you do now and actually making that practice better. So that's another example.
Exactly.
Questions for Kathy?
Well, no, I just want, are some of the things that people used to associate with home economics no longer
Right. It's family and consumer
there,
science now.
don't do them anymore?
Right.
So you don't need
But is
kitchens.
that a function of not doing it, or because we're not allowed to boil water here? I just wanna know.
And we're not allowed to fry things. We're allowed to boil water, but we're
Okay.
not allowed to fry things.
And we can use a microwave.
But the
that's fine.
culinary, Vivian would like this. One of the things that she was talking about was a Harvard kitchen. And that is becoming integrated in some high school curriculums. Is this whole idea of the culinary approach is totally different than what
Yes.
Paul and I went through.
Yes.
You know, home ec is no longer just
Well, it's
learning how to
hard
make hot
to tell
chocolate.
the kids what a box is or what, you know, is in a restaurant when I don't have it.
Right.
I don't have any of the things that they
Right.
might actually be working with in a restaurant. I have
Right.
basic regular kitchens from when the school was built in 1960.
Yeah, home kitchens.
Yeah, home kitchen.
Yeah.
Which is nice, you know, but,
But yeah, can you,
But that could make, again, there's another example where what you do could be made better.
It wasn't my fault.
Just once?
yeah, Kathy, that was something I would love to hear about, just the culinary, ideally, you know, specifics about that program, what you would like.
Well, you saw what I have, right?
Yeah.
So, it's difficult to, because I connect with BCC, there are certain things that I'm supposed to do to make sure that the students could, if they came from here, go to Culinary 2 at BCC. But because of the space that I have, and I don't have the equipment that a professional kitchen has, I don't
Yeah.
have any of it,
Yeah.
honestly. So, you know, when I explain about certain things, they're like, you know, look at me, what is that? Like, I don't have any way to
Yeah.
show them that besides a picture of it, or, you know, unless we go visit it, or, you know, we talked about trying to use the kitchen here, but that for some reason wasn't a possibility at that point.
So ideally, I mean, it sounds like ideally shifting from a home kitchen to a
Yes.
professional kitchen is really the direction we need to go.
Yes.
Did you visit Worcester Tech
Yeah.
also?
What was this? Yeah, Worcester Tech. Oh my gosh, that was amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm from Worcester, my,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
so,
Well,
and
no,
my
they
mom's
have
a
like
teacher, or was a
stations, and they
teacher.
have, and
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
and
the
I know
menu
that was
and the
incredible.
kitchen
They
and the,
sell,
yeah.
yeah, my parents will go
Yeah,
and
the
purchase
bakery.
cakes there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, the community can go and buy baked goods there and
And I
order
could not do
things.
all that honestly myself, I could not do a culinary program and a child
For
development
sure.
preschool program.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do both, you know,
Right.
so really, it is two separate things, you know, ideally I would like to do child development, preschool, and then move into internships and see how the students are working in other places
Mhm.
based on what they learned maybe in my program. You know, I'd like to see how those skills transfer, and then maybe another person or another way to do the culinary program, because I really can't do it all. I would like to, but I just
Right.
can't.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah.
Me?
Kara?
Hi, I'm Kara, I'm the librarian. So, my job in the library is to meet the learning and curricular needs of every teacher and every student in the building. At some point during their 4 years here, every student is in the library. I get a lot of classes that come in, so I have to be flexible and nimble, and my space has to be flexible and nimble. And I've done a lot over the last 9 years I've been there to recreate the space and to make it as adaptable as possible. And I've been sitting here sort of thinking about your question, and I actually do spend a lot of my day like rearranging the space for whatever's coming in that day. And I'm sure there's ways that could be improved on. So in terms of, like, you know, for your thinking, the things that I see the library would be needing, and I'm trying to remember, Paul, like from your question from the previous iteration, like that first, like the renovated. One of the things that we need more of in the library, I've adapted to back rooms into these quiet study rooms that are used for outside tutors, or students book them, or small groups will book them. One has a green screen in it, so students could do some filming in there, but those are in huge demand, and I think we need more of those, and that could even meet perhaps the need of like where common planning, teachers could meet in the library. And I honestly can't remember, do you remember, Steve, at all? I can't remember, like how many of those we had in the library. Like I feel like there probably weren't enough, like we would need more of these individual study rooms.
Well, it was moved because that became the band room in the last renovation.
Yeah, so the library would have,
Would be in
would
the
have been
front
right
here,
here, yeah. And actually, that is something that I do think, like, I believe the library is like the heart of the school, and if somebody had mentioned like that the school is, you know, the heart of our community, I believe it should have outside access, so that is a space that could be used at night for meetings, much instead of having to open the entire building and troop down there. I think that, Doug has mentioned a couple times he's heard about different schools that just put the books in storage, and I hope that we never become that school. I hope we never become that school, like
The library.
yeah. If you put my books in storage, that would be embarrassing. But I hope that we continue to be a school that, you know, promotes literature and reading and scholarship.
So, are books still an important part of the library?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Good
absolutely.
to hear.
But with that said, a lot of my role is also supporting technology and the digital divide. Like I provide computers and things to our students who don't have that. They're able to check those out of the library along with other, you know, video equipment and stuff. So with that also comes the need for storage, and also to make sure that we continue to have a robust infrastructure here that can support all of those devices. And I don't even know if that would come necessarily through just the library, but in any kind of renovation, that would definitely be, I mean, as you were talking about all the wires that we have like all over the building. Handicap accessibility, I think I mentioned that already. And then, so this is my 21st year here at Monument. I taught social studies for 12 years with Bill, and I've been in the library for 9, and I've never had a window. Even my classroom when I
That's
was
right,
age
you're
12,
in the middle room.
like I have not had a window.
But she's a lot warmer than I am.
I don't have a single pane window, yeah, so I do have heat. But talk to me in June when there's also
Yeah.
no air
When there's heat.
circulation and it's really
You
hot
walk in,
there.
water's on the tables.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think whatever building or plan that you come up with, improve the natural lighting and the ventilation. An issue that's come up this year in the library, which is one they never prepare you for in library school. There are 2 bathrooms in the library, I don't know if you can picture those. But we've been having issues in our bathroom, and they took the door off of the bathrooms and stuff, so I've seen a huge increase in the amount of students using those 2 bathrooms in the library. But they don't have fans and they don't have ventilation. So I'll leave that to your imagination.
When you say they took the doors off the bath, what is that?
There was like a door from the hallway into the boys' bathroom and in the girls' bathroom, and they took that off, so it's.
They had to widen the entrance.
They widened
They had to
for
widen it,
wheelchair.
So that
yeah.
you could get a wheelchair.
Wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve talked to us about that on, in
Yeah.
the building and grounds.
But so,
Okay.
I now have to have a lot of air freshener.
I like the sign.
But just ventilation, air quality, it gets incredibly dusty in the library because there is no, you know, there's like one thing blowing in dusty air, which is terrible for the books and probably the computers too.
People.
And the people, and my allergies, right?
Which surprisingly is an improvement because for years there was no circulation.
There was no circle, right?
It had been shut off
Yeah,
before years
right,
ago.
that's right.
Because we used to have school committee meetings and every time I came out of there with a headache and I couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
Because there was just no air circulating.
But to illustrate the, Steve, to illustrate the problem, with the HVA system is the night we were in there when Doug said, you know, and Terry didn't write an article about it, but we were sweating and they had the 2 fans and we couldn't hear what people were saying across the table. Molly hadn't joined us yet, but we couldn't, people on the other side, I couldn't hear what Rich and Dan Weston were saying because there's this huge industrial fan.
Well, they brought in
Is there-
fans for
and
you,
they
I
br-
didn't even get those fans.
Right. Terry was there that night.
That's why I didn't write an article about it. I couldn't hear anything.
And when they used to do the gym floors, I swear it came right
Oh,
into
right,
my
yeah.
room because it smelled the worst in my room, but if you went into the hallway, it didn't smell. So there was something like coming right into.
Well, that just points to something that we talked about earlier with Steve here about the HVA system and everything. He went over that. What do you think?
So what we talked about, if you wanted to get sort of a
Yeah.
tour and sort of see the spaces, that would probably,
I think
it's
we'd be right
now
on time.
7:30,
Yeah.
we might be 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
a quick peruse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you were gonna start?
We can start or end with me.
All right.
And then we'll go to.
Easier than the